Morning, friends, and welcome to another meeting of the United Lodge of Theosophists. We meet here once a week, and that's at this hour. And today we have our second meeting, in which we're studying the Living the Life from B.P. Wadia. All right. Now, when the messengers left the scene, and what was left was the message, both exoteric and esoteric. And also there were those students who were left behind to try as best they can to implement and carry out the message that the messengers left behind. However, the masters who sent the messengers are always present, although not seen by those of us in the world. And those students who are here in the world, we are to some extent warrior servant students, in that we have to be grounded in the fight, not being intimidated by the forces that array themselves against theosophy. We have to be warriors and not retreat, not be intimidated, even though we are not for destruction, but we're for the construction, rather, of ideas, bridges that will help others see the way out of some of this darkness, or the darkness that encompasses all. Although sometimes our head may be bloodied, that's metaphorically, we still stand straight and staunch to carry the message forward. That message which was presented over 100 years ago by HPB and William Q. Judge. The talk for today is states after death. The reading today comes from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. Thou grievest for those that may not be lamented, whilst thy sentiments are those of the expounders of the letter of the law. Those who are wise in spiritual things grieve neither for the dead nor for the living. I myself never was not, nor thou, nor all the princes of the earth, nor shall we ever hereafter cease to be. As the Lord of this mortal frame experiences therein infancy, youth, and old age, so in future incarnations will it meet the same. One who is confirmed in this belief is not disturbed by anything that may come to pass. The senses moving toward their appropriate objects are producers of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, which come and go and are brief and changeable. These do thou endure, O son of Bharata. For the wise man, whom these disturb not, and to whom pain and pleasure are the same, is fitted for immortality. There is no existence for that which does not exist, nor is there any non-existence for that what exists. By those who see the truth and look into the principle of things, the ultimate characteristic of these both is seen. Learn that he by whom all things are formed is incorruptible, and that no one is able to effect the destruction of it, which is inexhaustible. These finite bodies, which envelop the souls inhabiting them, are said to belong to him, the eternal, the indestructible, unprovable spirit, who is in the body. Wherefore, O Arjuna, resolve to fight. The man who believeth that it is this spirit which killeth, and he who thinketh that it may be destroyed, are both alike deceived. For it neither killeth, nor is it killed. It is not a thing of which a man may say, it has been, it is about to be, or it is to be hereafter. For it is without birth and meaneth not death. It is ancient, constant, and eternal, and is not slain when this its mortal frame is destroyed. How can the man who believeth that it is incorruptible, eternal, inexhaustible, and without birth think that it can be either killed or caused to be killed? As a man throweth away old garments and putteth on new, so even the dweller in the body, having quitted its old form, old frames, entereth into others which are new. Now to today's presentation.
Friends, consistent with today's reading from the Bhagavad Gita, saying that we never were not, nor shall we ever not be, the ancient wisdom handed down to us goes into states and stages from the unknowable all, through which all of us came, down through matter, and back up to our being reunited as one with the all. At that time we would be perfected beings. Today we will focus on the two states that occur after death of the body, which are Kama Loka and Devachan. Kama is a Sanskrit word for desire or passion. So we go to Kama Loka, or the plane or place of desire, first. The breath leaves the body, and we say the person is dead. But that is only the beginning of death. It proceeds on other planes. So when the frame is cold and eyes are closed, all the forces of the body and mind rush through the brain, and by a series of pictures, the whole life just ended is imprinted indelibly with the inner man, even down to the smallest detail of the most minute and fleeting impression we had in life. At this moment, though to all intents and purposes the person is dead to this life, the real man is busy in the brain, and not until his work there is ended is the person gone. The astral body detaches itself from the physical, and life energy having departed, the remaining 5 principles are in the plane of Kama Loka. Let's talk for a second. We have entire talks on the sevenfold nature of man, but this directly relates to it. The highest nature, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, our spiritual nature, is the threefold being, if you will, the highest, the real us, the immortal us, that goes on and on from life to life. The passions and desires consistent with Kama Loka, it said that we're sort of in Kama Loka when we're in the body on earth, is what we're speaking of here. That's at work in Kama Loka. Those lower passions and desires fold off in its khandhas. Okay, the astral body is here, the Kama Loka phase we're talking about. That visible body is what disintegrates into nature, and the manas, which is for discussion purposes divided into 2, if you will, while we're in the body, is actually only 1, is what we're speaking of here. And then there's this Intaskarana bridge, which communicates. We communicate up to the higher. We should be doing that anyway. So to move on a little bit here, so the natural separation of the principles brought about by death divides the total person into 3 parts, as was just alluded to. First, the visible body there is in time resolved into the different physical departments of nature. Second, the Kama Rupa, made up of the astral body and the passions and desires, which right here, begins at once to go to pieces on the astral plane. Third, the real man, the upper triad, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, deathless but now out of earth conditions, without body, begins in Devachan to function solely as mind, clothed in a very ethereal vesture, which it will shake off when the time comes for it to return to earth. Kama Loka is the astral region on and in and about the earth. But the ordinary laws here do not obtain there. In it, the ruling force is desire divorced from intelligence. Undoubtedly, it is the origin of the Christian theory of purgatory, where the soul undergoes penance for evil done, and from which it can be released by prayer and other ceremonies or offerings. The fact underlying this superstition is that the soul may be detained in Kama Loka by the enormous force of some unsatisfied desire, and cannot get rid of the astral and kamic clothing until that desire is satisfied. But if the person was pure-minded and of high aspirations, the separation of the principles on that plane is soon completed, permitting the higher triad to fully function in Devachan. Being that Kama Loka is in the purely astral sphere, it partakes of the nature of astral matter, which is essentially earthly and devilish. In Kama Loka, all the forces work undirected by soul or conscience. It might be called the slag pit of the great furnace of life, where nature provides for the sloughing off of elements which have no place in Devachan. The many degrees of these elements are known in Sanskrit as lokas, or places in a metaphysical sense. In life, some of the differences among men are modified and some inhibited by a similarity of body and heredity. But in Kama Loka, all the hidden desires and passions are let loose due to the absence of the body. The natural result of the thoughts during life and last thoughts of the person who die on earth are really powerful. The last thoughts and also all other thoughts during life is also taken into consideration in Kama Loka. A person's desires and passions are the principal kama, coalesce with the astral body after death and form an entity with its own term of life, though without soul. During mortal life, the desires and passions are guided by the mind and soul. After death, they work without guidance from the former master, the mind and soul. So the key thing here is while we live, we are responsible for these passions and desires and their effects. When we have left this life, we are still responsible, although they go on working and making effects on others while they last, and without direct guidance. They are a portion of the skandhas, which are the aggregates that make up the man. In Kama are the really active and important skandhas, which control rebirths and lead to all the varieties of life and circumstances upon each rebirth. They are being made from day to day under the law that every thought combines instantly with one of the elemental forces of nature, and all of these are inseparably connected with the being who evolved them. In Kama Loka, this mass of desire and thought exists until the conclusion of its disintegration. And then the remainder consists of the essence of those skandhas connected with the being that evolved them. They can no more be done away with than we can blot out the universe. Hence they remain until the being comes out of Devachan, and then at once by the law of attraction they draw to the being, who from them as germ or basis builds up a new set of skandhas for the new life. The astral man in Kama Loka is a mere shell, devoid of soul and mind, without conscience and also unable to act unless vivified by forces outside itself. It has that which seems like an animal or automatic consciousness, due wholly to the very recent association with the human ego. Every atom going to make up the man has a memory of its own, which can last a length of time proportionate to the force given it. And we're the ones giving it the force. In the case of a very material and gross or selfish person, the force lasts longer than in any other. Its purely astral portion contains and carries the record of all that ever passed before the person when living. One of the qualities of the astral substance is to absorb all scenes and pictures and the impressions of all thoughts, to keep them and to throw them forth by reflection when the conditions permit. This astral shell wavers and floats about from place to place without any will of its own. It's governed wholly by attractions in the astral and magnetic fields. Astral shells are the clothing thrown off by the inner man, the brutal earthly portion discarded in the flight to Devachan, and so have always been considered by the ancients as devils, our personal devils, because essentially astral and earthly and passional. So existing in the sphere of Kama Loka are the elementals or nature forces. They are innumerable and their divisions are almost infinite. They are, in a sense, the nerves of nature. So there is a summarization in the Ocean of Theosophy, chapter 12, and chapter 12 of answers to questions on the Ocean of Theosophy, on elementals, shells, and shells of the departed and mediums. An hour doesn't give us enough time to go into all that. Take a read if in these two chapters of the ocean and answers to questions on the ocean to get a good summary of all of these items. In the state of Kama Loka are those who are suddenly shot out of life before the natural end of their lives. These individuals are not really dead. They pass a term in Kama Loka almost equal to how long they would have lived had it not been for their sudden termination. To bring on a normal death, a factor not recognized by medical science must be present. The factor comes under the great natural law of cohesive forces. Under this law, the normal destruction of the cohesive force cannot be brought about by mechanical processes except in respect to the physical body. So a suicide, or person killed by accident, murdered, or executed, is hurled into the Kama Loka state, only partly dead. There, the remaining principles have to wait until the actual natural life term is reached. So the degrees of Kama Loka provide for the many varieties of shells remaining from the departed individual. Some pass the period in great suffering, and others in a dreamy sort of sleep, each according to moral responsibility. Executed criminals are often thrown out of life full of hate and revenge, smarting under a penal system perceived to be unjust. They are ever rehearsing in Kama Loka their crime, their trial, their execution, and their revenge. In answers to questions on the ocean of theosophy, Mr. Crosby noted that one result of capital punishment is an increase in crime because these bodiless men stimulate with their passions the minds of men already evilly inclined. After a certain time in Kama Loka, the being falls into a state of unconsciousness which precedes the change into the next state. It is like the birth into life, preluded by a term of darkness and heavy sleep. It then wakes to the joys of Devachan. So we'll go into a discussion of that now. So Devachan is known as the place of the gods. Having struggled out of the body and through Kama Loka to loosen himself from the lower skandhas, the higher principles, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, begin to think in a manner different from that which the body and brain permitted in life. This is the state of Devachan, a Sanskrit word meaning literally the place of the gods, and known to Christians as heaven. In Devachan, the soul enjoys contentment. In the ancient books, it is said that this state lasts, quote, for years of infinite number, unquote, and, quote, for a period proportionate to the merit of the being, unquote. When the mental forces peculiar to the state are exhausted, quote, the being is drawn down again to be reborn in the world of mortals, unquote. Devachan is therefore an interlude between births in the world. Only by the force or operation of karma are we taken out of Devachan. It is something like the pressure of atmosphere which, being continuous and uniform, will push out or crush that which is subjected to it, unless there be a compensating quality of atmosphere to counteract the pressure. In the atmosphere example, the karma of the being is the atmosphere always pressing the being on or out from state to state. The counteracting quality of atmosphere is the force of the being's own life thoughts and aspirations, which prevent his coming out of Devachan until that force is exhausted, but which being spent has no more power to hold back the decree of our self-made mortal destiny. Read that again. Force of the being's own life thoughts and aspirations, which prevent his coming out of Devachan until that force is exhausted, but which, being spent, has no more power to hold back the decree of our self-made mortal destiny, which is, in most cases, in our situation, coming back into another life. In life, we can act out only a fraction of our thoughts, aspirations, and dreams. The unacted out portion is stored in manas as latent energy until death. Then it bursts from the weakened bonds and plunges manas, the thinker, into the expansion, use, and development of the thought force set up in life. While ignorance and delusion of his own powers and faculties is the cause for going into this state, the whole process is remedial, restful, and beneficial. Our last series in life of powerful and deeply imprinted thoughts are those which give color and trend to the whole life in Devachan. On those the soul and mind fix themselves and weave of them a whole set of events and experiences, expanding them to their highest limit, carrying out all that was not possible in life. Expanding and weaving these thoughts, the entity has its youth and growth and growing old. What the entity is really experiencing is the uprush of the force, its expansion, and its dying down to final exhaustion. If the person has led a colorless life, the Devachan will be colorless. If a rich life, then it will be rich in variety and effect. When we are there, this present life is a dream. It is not, in any sense, monotonous. We are too prone to measure all possible states of life and places for experience by our present earthly experience, and to imagine it to be reality. But the life of the soul is endless and not to be stopped for one instant. Leaving our physical body is but transition to another place or plane for living in. Nature, always kind, leads us to the Devachan state for a rest from life in the body, for the flowering of the best and highest in our natures. So in Devachan, we get to practice all of our good thoughts, etc., and solidify them. Our idea of time on this earth in Devachan, our idea of time is of this earth. In Devachan, there is no such thing as time as we know it on earth. The soul indulges in no speculations as to the lapse of moments. All is made up of events, while all the time the solar orb is marking off the years for us on the earth plane. No one but a master can tell what the time would be for the average man in this century in every land. But as time varies with the intensities of one's thoughts, so it must be in Devachan. What the master did say is, quote, the, quote, dream of Devachan lasts until karma is satisfied in that direction. In Devachan, there is a gradual exhaustion of forces. The stay in Devachan is proportioned to the unfinished psychic impulses originating in earth life. Those whose attractions were material will be sooner drawn back into rebirth by the force of tanha, end quote. This thirst for life, expressed by the word tanha, is the pulling or magnetic force lodged in the skandhas inherent in all beings. desperately materialistic thinkers have no more than very vague forces in them that are appropriate to the state of Devachan. So they are torpid for a while, and then they live again on earth. A letter from Master K.H. with reference to Devachan notes that, quote, "In it we are rested, that part of us which could not bloom under the chilling skies of earth life bursts forth into flower and goes back with us to another life, stronger and more a part of our nature than before. Nature kindly aids us in the interminable struggle, while thus keep the mind revolving about this petty personality and its good and evil fortunes." So entities, that's the end of the quote by Master Mahatma K.H. Going on, entities in Devachan are not wholly devoid of power to those left, to help those left on earth. Love, the master of life, is real, pure, and deep. And those will sometimes cause the happy ego in Devachan to affect those left on earth for their good. This is possible under a law of the occult universe, a fact given out by HPB without much attention being drawn to it. But we cannot reach those in Devachan, nor affect them unless we are adepts. Adepts deal with certain entities in Devachan for the purpose of getting them to return to earth for the benefit of the race. So the whole period allotted by the soul's forces being ended in Devachan, the magnetic threads which bind it to earth began to assert their power. The self, capital S, wakes from the dream. It is borne swiftly off to a new body, and then, just before birth, it sees for a moment all the causes that led it to Devachan and back to the life it is about to begin. And knowing it to be all just, to be the result of its own past life, it takes up the cross again, and another soul has come back to earth. Just a couple notes, and I'll open it for comment. The 1,500 years general average given for the stay in Devachan may not be a helpful indicator on a case-by-case basis. The individual karma we make can vary widely. Okay, but this general average does give us the length of a very important human cycle, the cycle of reincarnation, which we have talks about as well, and it's all over the literature. For under that law, national development will be found to repeat itself, and the times that are past will be found to come again. In answer to questions, Mr. Crosby noted that the physical plane has no bearing on the Devachanic state, although just as Kama Loka is anywhere, Devachan is anywhere. While we speak of coming and going to Devachan as if it were a matter of space and distance, there might be Devachanic beings right where we are now. But not belonging to this plane, they do not disturb us, and we do not disturb them. Another question. Would you say that the Kama Loka condition is merely a continuance of the physical existence in the sense that so many of our dreams are? And the answer is, in the majority of cases, one who dies a natural death has a Kama Lokic existence analogous in time to the dreaming state which precedes deep sleep. But feelings and desires along the lines of envy, revenge, anger, lust are left there as forces which keep on operating after the man has no further touch with them. He meets the results of these operations when he returns. Those are some of the deadly sins: envy, revenge, anger, lust. If we got any, we got to get rid of them. Okay, I think we were going to stop there with a prepared presentation and open the floor for questions and comments. Would you grab the mic in the back, please, if you have questions or comments? Grab the mic, please.
Oh, yeah. The expression devoid of intelligence. So, I think they said desire devoid of intelligence. So then, what is it that's moving this desire in its activity on these planes that you speak of, beyond the physical plane?
Well, it gets the impressions from around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like a rudderless ship out there in the ocean waves. You know, the wave pushes it one way and then the other way and so forth. Mm-hmm. But if in life we had done the right thing, it gets through without being affected very much. If we hadn't done the right thing, then we might just go all over the ocean. So it's got no intelligence to tell it where to go. Mm. It's kind of like an elemental. Mm. We influence the elementals, and they develop in certain ways. So then
I guess you can say the being that is in the Kama Loka state, the notion of Devachan, which comes after that, that is not some place that you have to go necessarily. Is it a question of after the Kama Loka energy dissipates or dissolves, automatically you're right there. Even though Loka means place, but Devachan, I guess that's place also. But is it a question of movement, or is it just a question of mentality, condition that's there already?
It's a state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it could be right here.
Uh-huh.
You know, and we only perceive things of this earth.
Mm.
Matter, what we call, things, books and so forth, and people and whatever. But that world could also be here as well, on a different plane.
So if you...
So it's a matter of perception, I think. It's a quick answer to your question.
Okay.
It's a level of consciousness.
Okay.
Perception level of consciousness.
So then, if you say when you're angry and the other negatives, you're in a state of Kama Loka. Yeah. Okay. And reverse that. If you are happy and joy, could you say that you're in a state of Devachan?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So both.
You can have heaven on earth.
Okay. So both these states, then, Kama Loka and Devachan, earth life is just a materialization of them in that sense, since it's a state of consciousness that you say that it is a state of consciousness, and since you can be in a certain state of consciousness on the physical plane, so but these Kama Loka and Devachan are their lowest portions, you could say, or would you say the lowest portions of those are here or can be exhibited here on this physical plane?
Without getting too deep, and then we'll probably get deep, but we are sitting here in bodies right now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean we're totally on the physical plane? We could drift in and out, I would think. I mean, this is through this view, understanding based on what he's read, that we could drift in and out of these states.
Mm-hmm.
while we're in the body.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't see any fixed boundaries here, other than when the body departs and disintegrates. Then we have these conditions occurring, which are really set up by us in our life when we're in the body on this earth. This is our training ground.
Okay.
We don't have much of training ground here. It's just an automatic reaction kind of thing. Except when you're in Devachan, it's an automatic reaction too, based on things that we've set up already.
So since it's all a matter of consciousness in and out of these states, then while you're in the body, and then so I'm trying to establish some sort of analogy between the sleep of death and the sleep of the body. It seems like, so when you go to sleep, you break consciousness, something like that, and when you go to death, consciousness is broken. So where's the problem of continuity of consciousness? When you return from a sleep, there's that continuity of consciousness. So what is it about death that breaks the continuity of consciousness?
I wouldn't use that word break.
Well, I'm saying you don't remember, you don't recall, whereas there's a continuity in that sense. When you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, you continue on. So call it break or whatever you want to call it.
Remember half of what you dream. You may remember very little bit of what you dream, because we have this. We can call it a break, but we've got to remember that this is remembered. It's recorded. All of this is recorded.
Okay, but to the person.
Answering your question about sleep and these processes, there are a lot of analogies between going to sleep and the it's called the banquet of the gods when we're in the deep sleep. And I saw a hand wave, and so we need some clarification here.
Thank you. Well, there is a difference, because when we're in a body, that link is there. We have the mind works in two different ways. There's a higher and a lower, per se. But when we are out of body, there's no such link. There's no brain, because it refers to the student's question as to why you remember when you wake up that you were in sleep, whereas the soul life is at night. When we are no longer conscious on the physical plane, we live in the higher levels of consciousness when we go to deeper sleep.
We're up here in deep sleep.
Right. So
okay.
It is a short rest period, whereas when we are out of the body and there is no brain, the soul is at rest, assimilating what it had experienced on earth, and hopefully they were positive in the sense that it can come out as a higher individuality for the benefit of humanity. But that is an assimilation process. So it's a bit longer than the nightly sleep we go to, but we are with our soul life during sleep as well. It's just that the brain is incapacitated and it does not remember on the higher planes what the individuality was all about. But that is the soul's higher aspects at night that is finding expression. So when we have a better brain with deeper capacity, we can remember more of the impressions that the sleeping period leaves.
So the moral of the story continues to be give it your best shot while you're in the body, because you might get a better body later on if you if you don't like what you should not get into likes and dislikes, but whatever you have now, you could get a better one later, you could get a different one later. Whatever you need is your experience. That's the kind of body you have, is what it boils down
But
to.
the brain is there when it's the link between the higher and the lower, whereas at rest there's no brain. The physical drops. And we have to remember that that continuity of consciousness is there.
Mhm.
It's just that the soul is at rest in its
Right.
assimilation process. There is no breakage of consciousness at all.
No, when we're asleep in that deep sleep mode, the body is totally at rest. It's not interfering with this banquet of the gods, and we get enlightened, if you will, whether we know it or not. And in the morning we wake up fresh and with these ideas fresh and so forth. Maybe not remembering that we were in at the banquet, but still
we had a snack.
Point of view.
So then, whereby your title is States After Death of the presentation, in Orthodox religion, they also have states after death. So how does Theosophy vary from, let's say, a Christian's perspective of a state after death? They assume that one goes to heaven or hell and communes with the deity or the God, whichever they prefer to use. So what's the difference?
Certainly, way different. Let me take a shot at it, and then another would like to take a shot at it. We talked about the devilish stuff here. Okay, somebody's picked this up. That's the hell piece. Okay, heaven is understood in modern religion to be something that is unending. Continues on. If you're a good person on this life, then you don't have to deal with this stuff anymore. You go to heaven. Okay, you got to believe a certain way, and so forth. But if you if you meet the criteria of modern religion, the idea is you get to heaven and you stay there forever, and you rejoice in the golden gates and all that stuff. Okay, heaven, even though it's considered eternity, if you will, eternity has its limits, and whatever period of time you're talking about, you're getting prepared. You're coalescing everything you've learned while in the body and all your past lives and so forth, to come back into the body and be of service. Now, we're talking about the ordinary people, like I think most of us are. Adepts have a different process. We won't get into that. But they choose to come back in the body to serve humanity, and that's where many who are in the body right now are working toward. I think there's another comment up here. So we got the hell, we got the heaven. These ideas are there. We talked about purgatory. Okay, that's this right here. Comparing this to modern religion or modern Christianity. In the East, it's not. It's more like this. Comment?
Well, between the modern religions and Theosophy, there is a tremendous amount of difference.
Of course there is.
With Theosophy, the individual carries the responsibility for all their thoughts, speech, and action, how they conduct themselves while they're on earth in a physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And the afterlife that follows is the effect of what has been done here on earth. When the individuality goes into the rest period, it's going to assimilate what was learned. The posit is that perfectibility is possible for human beings, that we are not sinful little human beings, but we come from higher intelligences, and when we learn how to conduct ourselves on earth in the benefit of all that exhibit themselves around us, then we also fit ourselves to walk the path towards perfectibility. And this is the exercise of the paramitas with the dhyana path, which is meditation, And what follows from those two aspirations is proper conduct, which is a beneficent influence that comes from the individual towards all that lives and breathes. And the Devachanic interlude is just that. It's a specific period of assimilation when the individuality is going to come back again. Whereas in the Christian religion, there is no responsibility assigned to anything that any individual does. All you have to do is just blindly believe, and then you're forgiven. There is no such law in nature. Nature's law is a strict justice for all. So whatever it is that we do, we're responsible for it. It does not disappear. What we have done, whether it is harmonizing or disharmonizing, we're responsible for it. What nature does is it gives us an opportunity to correct our behavior and bring the disharmony back to harmony again. So this is missing from the religions, which makes humanity at their mercy, in the sense that we're either going to go one place or another. And indeed, these are not locations. These are just levels of consciousness. It makes absolutely no sense to any thinking human being that that would be the outcome of life, especially when we ask why we are here, what is the meaning of life, what is the best achievable for humanity. All these things have to be answered in a manner that makes sense. And theosophy being sanctified common sense, anything that does not sit with our common sense cannot be reality, because our earth life is elusive. It's not permanent. It constantly changes. It is our soul life that is permanent and enduring.
So some benchmarks, this student was listening to you say, forgiveness of sins, religion, particularly Christian religion. There's no such thing. We're responsible for our own behavior. And reincarnation and karma. Come on in. How are you?
I have a question. Now, in organized religion, for instance, if you're in hell, you have the devil supposedly controlling things down there. Mm-hmm. And if you're in heaven, there is a controlling factor there as well. So in these states, according to Theosophy, what would be the controlling factor? Meaning the devil would, if you're in the Christian hell, I guess the devil will be the general determining how much pain you're going to get, or how much suffering you're going to get.
Okay. Yeah,
so,
pain we talked about.
Yeah, so now in Kama Loka, what would be the controlling factor of how much suffering you would get, as well as in Devachan, how much joy you would receive? If you're in heaven, the God to be maybe would be, oh, you've been a good guy, you know, so you would get the nectar of the gods, so to speak. So is there a controlling factor in either Kama Loka or Devachan determining how much pleasure or pain you would get?
Absolutely. It's what you set up when you're in the body. Is bottom line. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of the controlling factor. You determine through karma and reincarnation. You determine the soul determines what it needs for growth. Mm-hmm. And that's how the pain comes in and stuff like that.
I was referring to
the kind of bodies we get.
I was referring to, or trying to get to the point of, is there, for instance, okay, you determine it, but what sort of like brings it forth? You mentioned the term elemental and skandhas. Could you elaborate more on what they are, the elemental and the skandha?
Well, that's kind of another talk too.
Okay. But
yeah, there are categories of skandhas and so forth. Essentially, that's stuff we make while we are on this earth. Things that we actually set in motion by our attitude, our passions and desires, and hatred and love and so forth. All of these attributes set these elementals, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So they are forces.
Don't have these forces. They're forces, and they don't have any conscience of their own. You guide them in whatever direction, and eventually they are going to evolve into states of being and stuff like that. So we're setting all that up right now. We're guiding them. We're our gods, if you will.
Yeah. So
we're their gods.
So the order in which they come, for instance, let's say you're in Kama Loka and you're doing a lot of suffering and regretting, et cetera, and then that changes to some other kind of suffering. Something like that's dependent on, as I get it, the amount of energy that you put into it, that thought, and that energy dissipates, and then the other one sort of kicks in.
Right. This is kind of negative connotation,
okay,
if you will, and that's a situation where you're learning different things, and whatever it's the force behind it, as we talked about this force of nature, and it gets counteracted, if you will, by our goodness or our badness or whatever.
Okay.
That's the direction. That's common. That's it in a nutshell. Sure.
Is it Kama Loka the same as the astral body?
Kama Loka is on the astral. Yeah, it's on the astral plane, if you will. It's not necessarily a place. I mean, it could be right here, but it's a state of consciousness.
Is it? But is it the same? Like, is it on the? I don't know. If is it the same state of mind as the astral?
Yeah. I mean, it's astral. It's linked to we talked about the sevenfold nature.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
The astral body. You know, that's our body that is basically the prototype of what we see in the mirror. And then we have the visible. Hi, come on in.
Nathan, it was at 11. I confused it.
Good guy. Why don't you turn it off?
Honey, you shouldn't be drinking while you're in it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're going to take a short break and then we're going to go into our program on living the life, which is we're going through a book and we're having discussions on that. Next week's talk is on yoga aphorisms, which is a roundtable discussion, really. So, November 14th. Yeah, there's a library meeting over at the Silver Spring Library. I think it's 11:30. So the announcement is over there on the table, and we'll be talking about the secret doctrine and the fundamentals of Theosophy.
That's gonna be the 14th.
Yeah, Saturday. It's a Saturday.